Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy, Sports and Fitness Rants? I'm back, guys. Click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Got another great video for you guys today. As usual, you guys know the deal on this channel. It's all about the facts on this channel. And it's all about, setting the record straight. It's all about putting some respect on Michael Jordan, putting some respect on his era. And in this video, we're going to talk about my 90s all-time starting five. That's right, guys. This video is inspired by, I want to make sure I get this right, Charles Duro 6644. I hope I'm saying your name right, man. Charles Duro 6644. He asked for my 90s all-time starting five. And, man, I tell you, it was hard to do this. It was really hard to do this, guys. But we're going to go over this in this video. And I want to thank you guys, man. All my subscribers out there, man. Everybody across the world, everyone across the states. Shout out to Puerto Rico. I saw them pop up on my analytics for the first time. So shout out to everybody in Puerto Rico watching my videos, man. Thank you. Much respect. I'm truly humbled, guys, by all the respect, by all the support. It means a lot to me, guys. It really does. I'm truly, truly humbled. So much respect to everybody out there, everyone across the world, everyone across states has been supporting my channel, guys, with the comments, with the likes, subscribing. It truly means a lot, guys. Thank you very much, man. And you guys know what to do, man. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So, yes, once again, shout out to Charles Duro 6644. Once again, I hope I'm saying your name right, man. Shout out to you for asking this question and inspiring this video of my 90s all-time starting five. Now, guys, this was very difficult for me. And I wanted to try to, narrow it down to just people that we consider to be 90s era players. All right? That's why I was trying to, just narrow it down to guys that we consider 90s era players. Not guys that were maybe considered like 2000s era players or guys that were considered like 80s era players. We're going to just talk about and try to focus on guys that I consider to be strictly 90s era players. And, yeah. Now, listen, guys. This all-time starting five from the 90s, this is not the way that I did this. I didn't pick the players that I thought were the best at each position of the 90s. Maybe those players are, maybe they're not. I picked my 90s all-time starting five. I was a little bit biased, I guess, guys. I'll just put that out there. Some of these guys that I had maybe like a love about, or, they were one of my favorite players, growing up watching. So maybe I favored them a little and I put them in my all-time starting five of the 90s. But let's start at the point guard position. This was really hard for me, guys. This may have been the hardest position for me to pick. So like I said, I wanted to keep it about 90s players. Because for me, my first impulse was to put Jason Kidd. That was my first impulse, guys, was to put Jason Kidd as my starting point guard for my 90s all-time starting team. However, the more I thought about it, the more I looked into things, the more I couldn't really justify Jason Kidd and consider him a 90s era player. Yes, Jason Kidd did play about 5 or 6 seasons in the 90s, right? But he's really considered a 2000s player, really, by his standards. By his career, his best years were probably in the 2000s. 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. Those are probably Jason Kidd's best years, right? Yes, he had good years in the 90s. I'm not saying he wasn't good in the 90s or great in the 90s. But for me, I really couldn't consider him a 90s point guard. So I crossed off Jason Kidd. Like I said, I originally had put him. Like, that wasn't even a question for me. Jason Kidd's one of my favorite players. His all-around game, his impact. I told you, Jason Kidd, to me, can impact winning without ever scoring a point, right? Without really, doing things that you would consider to be impactful. Jason Kidd impacted games in ways that didn't show up in the box score. Hustling, diving on the floor for loose balls, saving balls for going out of bounds, right? His leadership, all these things, man, running the fast break. This is Jason Kidd, man, right? His overall defense, his rebounding ability, all those things, man. But I didn't consider him a 90s player, so it became a three-man race for me, guys, at the point guard position for guys that are 90s players. It came down to John Stockton for me, Gary Payton, and Kevin Johnson, guys. Those were the three players I landed on that I was debating about who would be my starting point guard for my all-time 90s starting five. Now, I think John Stockton is a greater point guard than Kevin Johnson and Gary Payton. If I had to rank them all time, I'll go with John Stockton above those guys, right? That's not what this is about. But for me, I picked Kevin Johnson, guys. I picked Kevin Johnson for my 90s all-time starting five to run my point guard position. Once again, this is not saying that Kevin Johnson's greater than John Stockton or that he's greater than Gary Payton, right? But to me, Kevin Johnson should be in the Hall of Fame, right? So Kevin Johnson, to me, is a Hall of Famer, even though he doesn't have the honor. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Anyone that grew up in the 90s, watch Kevin Johnson, you guys feel the same way. You know that he should be in the Hall of Fame. Some people might say that he didn't play long enough or have a long enough career. Nah, that's BS, man. Kevin Johnson absolutely did enough in the amount of time that he played, the impact that he had on the game, some of the records that he has. This man was sensational at scoring and dropping assists, man. So I will go to Kevin Johnson. Once again, I'm not saying that he's better than John Stockton. I believe John Stockton was the greater point guard. But I'm going to go with Kevin Johnson, guys. Like I said, a little bias here, man. I always liked Kevin Johnson's game. I just like Kevin Johnson, man. He was a guy that could get up and dunk on you, man, at the point guard position. Only about 6'1", about 170 pounds. But like I said, could score, put up about 20, 25 points a game, and anywhere between 9 and 12 assists at his peak. That's Kevin Johnson, y'all. One of few players to average 20-plus points and 10-plus assists for, 3 or 4 consecutive seasons. So I'm going to go with Kevin Johnson, man. Once again, I'm not saying he's greater than John Stockton. I love John Stockton, man. But I went with Kevin Johnson, man. To me, he was just a little bit, I liked him a little bit more, guys. That's all it was about. At the shooting guard position, do we even need to talk about this? No, we know it's Michael Jordan, man. Michael Jordan is my starting 2 guard for my 90s all-time starting 5. There was no question here, man. Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time. He was the greatest player of his era. He's the greatest shooting guard of all time. He was the greatest shooting guard of the 90s. So it was a no-brainer. I put Michael Jordan as shooting guard. I think we could all easily say Michael Jordan, right? If we had to do an all-time starting 5 in the 90s, Michael Jordan's going to be on just about every single one of those lineups. So I went with Michael Jordan, right? No-brainer at the shooting guard position. All right, nothing really needs to be said there. It's Michael Jordan, right? At the small forward position, I went with Scottie Pippen, guys. That's right, I went with Scottie Pippen. As much shade as people say that or hate that people say I give Scottie Pippen on my channel with the videos I've made, remember, I've never hated on Scottie Pippen. What I'm doing and what we've done is put Scottie Pippen's career into perspective. Because all of a sudden, I've told you guys, Scottie Pippen has been pumped up as the greatest player of his era, the greatest player in the 90s, right? The greatest all-around player in 1994, the greatest all-around player in the 90s. All these things I'll say about Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen is an all-time great player. He is a great all-around player, but he was never the greatest all-around player in the NBA at any time of his career. Never, guys. He never was, and I explained this in videos. So once again, I've never hated on Scottie Pippen. We're just putting Scottie Pippen's career in perspective because, like we said, they're trying to rewrite the history all these years later and pump Scottie Pippen up into a realm that he never was. Once again, Michael Jordan being held to a high standard, right? They must continue to pump up Scottie Pippen to diminish from Michael Jordan, right? They're not trying to give Scottie Pippen credit by pumping him up. They're just trying to take away from Michael Jordan, right? It's disingenuous, the love they give Scottie Pippen. But as you guys can see, I think highly of Scottie Pippen, and I put him in my starting 5. He's my starting small forward of the 90s, all-time starting 5. To me, it wasn't really a question for me because when I have Michael Jordan, right? When you have Michael Jordan in your starting 5 of the shooting guard, I think it was just a no-brainer for me to put Scottie Pippen. Because once again, they're the greatest duo in NBA's history, in my opinion. They're the greatest defensive duo in NBA's history, in my opinion. So to have Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, that was part of the reason why I didn't go with John Stockton at the point guard position. I went with Kevin Johnson, right? Less defense than John Stockton, but a little more offense, right? So we don't really need John Stockton's defense per se because you have a Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, 2 elite defensive players at their positions, probably the 2 best defensive players at their positions. So I sacrificed a little bit with not having John Stockton there for Kevin Johnson, a little more scoring. And Kevin Johnson is a very solid playmaker and passer, not on the level of a John Stockton, but not that far below him either. So I went with that, guy. So I went with Scottie Pippen, small forward position. You know, maybe you could have went with Dominique Wilkins, but is Dominique Wilkins a 90s player or is he an 80s player, right? I don't know, guys. That's a close one. But Dominique Wilkins had some injury problems in the 90s. You could maybe go Dominique Wilkins. You could maybe go Chris Mullin, maybe, at the small forward position for the 90s. I mean, like I said, it's really depending on your preference, but to me, it was no-brainer with Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan on the court together. That duo, man, they would be sensational like they were. So I went with Scottie Pippen in the small forward position. Now, the next position, the power forward position, this got a little bit difficult for me also, man. It came down to a 2-man race between Karl Malone and Charles Barkley for me. Now, for me, I have Charles Barkley ranked higher all time than Karl Malone. I know a lot of people probably like, what? How do you have Charles Barkley ahead of Karl Malone? I just do, guys. For me, when I think about Karl Malone versus Charles Barkley, and I picked Charles Barkley for my all-time starting 5 power forward. It was Charles Barkley I went with. It was a very close one for me, though, guys, with Karl Malone. But the reason I went with Charles Barkley over Karl Malone, the reason why I believe that Charles Barkley was greater than Karl Malone, I have him ranked higher than Karl Malone all time, is because for me, Charles Barkley was the better overall player. He was just a greater overall basketball player than Karl Malone for me. I think that when we think about Charles Barkley coming into the league, right, from about 86 or 87 to about 1993, I want to say, maybe 94. To me, Charles Barkley's, his athleticism was superior to Karl Malone's. He was just a greater athlete. If you guys watch Charles Barkley from like 87 to like 92, 91, like a 3 or 4 year window there, this man was all over the court. He can get up and down the court like Karl Malone, not like Karl Malone could. Not saying that Karl Malone couldn't get up and down the court, but Charles Barkley could run the break. He could run the break, man, in his younger years, man. He was an athletic freak at 6'4", 6'5", to be a rebounding champ, still the shortest rebounding champ in NBA's history. Karl Malone was a very solid rebounder, but I'm going Charles Barkley was a greater rebounder. Scoring the basketball, yeah, I guess we could say Karl Malone was a greater scorer overall, but to me, Charles Barkley was better down low. I think Karl Malone had a better mid-range jump shot, a more consistent mid-range game. Yes, absolutely, him and John Stockton with the pick and roll. Karl Malone was great, those pick and pops. So I would say, yes, Karl Malone had a better mid-range game, but to me, Charles Barkley was better inside the paint than Karl Malone. He was a better finisher to me. He finished with more power than Karl Malone. Charles Barkley, his two-handed power dunks, all those things, man. I think Charles Barkley led the league in effective field goal percentage several seasons. He led the league in two-point percentage several seasons. Charles Barkley was excellent down low at finishing, man, always taking high-quality shots. So I'll give the edge to Charles Barkley down low, but I guess it's pretty much even with scoring. Like I said, we could maybe give the edge to Karl Malone as far as scoring goes. But it's very close there. Like I said, I give the edge to Charles Barkley rebounding. Playmaking, I'll give the edge to Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley, to me, was a better playmaker out of the post, creating off the dribble. I'll give the edge to Charles Barkley over Karl Malone. I think Charles Barkley had about 20 or so triple-doubles in his career. I think Karl Malone had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 maybe or something like that in his career. I think Charles Barkley was better at getting assists. Like I said, at just playmaking in general. I'll give the edge to Charles Barkley. Defense, we'll give the edge to Karl Malone. Longevity goes to Karl Malone, absolutely. That's the main problem I have with Charles Barkley. Why a lot of people put Karl Malone above Charles Barkley is Charles Barkley's last 4 or 5 seasons in the league, he kind of deteriorated. And it was mostly due to Charles Barkley really having problems with his weight, right? Always having that battle with his weight. We all know about Karl Malone. The guy was a physical freak, right? He was a physical specimen, always in top condition, always playing 82 games, right? The man was just very tough, man, Karl Malone. So in that regard, he was greater and better than Charles Barkley at staying healthy, staying on the court, keeping himself in good physical peak condition. But overall, I'm going with Charles Barkley. Like I said, overall at their peaks, I think Charles Barkley's peak was better. He was a better shot blocker at his peak, better at getting steals at his peak. He was a better athlete, better rebounder. He was more exciting to watch. So once again, got a little favoritism here, a little bias. Charles Barkley is one of my favorite players growing up, man. Just one of my favorite players, guys, Charles Barkley. I loved his personality, all that stuff, man. The round mound, the rebound. I mean, even to this day, you see the personality, the charisma of Charles Barkley, man, which is why he's so popular, so famous, man. So I went with Charles Barkley, the power forward position. If you pick Karl Malone, guys, you can't really go wrong either way. Give me Charles Barkley, though. And at the center position, I went with Hakeem Olajuwon. Now, once again, this was a tough decision. I mean, not really a tough decision for me. It was a no-brainer to go with Hakeem Olajuwon as a starting center. But there was a lot of competition at the center position in his era, the 90s. Guys like David Robinson. To me, David Robinson is, I don't know if he's underrated, but he's just never really appreciated. People don't mention him much. David Robinson was sensational on both ends of the ball for a long period of time. To me, he was a better athlete than Hakeem Olajuwon, right? He was just a little bit quicker on his feet. He was faster. He could run down the court. He was like a deer out there, David Robinson. Hakeem Olajuwon was just more skilled, I think, than David Robinson. He had better footwork than David Robinson. Obviously, I think he was a little bit more offensively superior, right? His offensive game was a little bit deeper than David Robinson. Even though David Robinson had a very good mid-range jumper, David Robinson was very good inside the paint at finishing strong. But I'm going to give the edge to Hakeem Olajuwon. A hit a better touch to me. He was just a greater player, Hakeem Olajuwon. Defense is very close. Hakeem is regarded as one of the greatest defensive players of all time, if not the greatest defensive player of all time, right? However, David Robinson is not far behind him. David Robinson still to this day, is one of the very few players in NBA's history to have a scoring title, a rebounding title, and a blocks title in his career. Hakeem never accomplished that. Neither did someone like a Shaquille O'Neal, guys. David Robinson was an excellent two-way player. Excellent two-way player. Like I said, if Hakeem Olajuwon wasn't in the 90s, David Robinson would probably be considered a lot greater than he is, because he would have probably been the greatest center of that era. And we're talking about an era with great, all-time great centers, guys. Guys like Patrick Ewing. If you told me Patrick Ewing was your all-time starting five center, I wouldn't knock you for it. Patrick Ewing had a lot of heart, a lot of grit. Once again, Patrick Ewing played an era. If Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson are not in that era, then Patrick Ewing is viewed much, much differently, right? Patrick Ewing in this era, you put Patrick Ewing in the 2000s, or you put Patrick Ewing in the 2010s era, he's probably the greatest center. So much respect to Patrick Ewing, much respect to David Robinson, but I went with Hakeem Olajuwon, even though you had guys like Mutombo and Alonzo Mourning, right? Some of these guys that played in the 90s. Give me Hakeem Olajuwon as my starting center from an all-time starting five in the 90s, guys. Hakeem Olajuwon. Once again, I don't think it was a question. So when you think about the team, we got Kevin Johnson, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon. Three of the all-time great defensive players, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Hakeem Olajuwon, to help out with guys who are lesser on the defensive end, like a Charles Barkley, Kevin Johnson. That wasn't necessarily how I thought about it, but as you can see, that pretty much sums it up. And I think those guys, I think that starting five is excellent starting five. Like I said, it was very tough for me at the point guard position, at the power forward position, guys. It was very tough. But these are the guys that I consider, the guys that I picked, and these guys I think we all can consider the 90s era NBA players. You guys put your top starting or your starting five of the 90s down in the comments. Let me know if you guys, what you guys think about my five, man, and maybe yours is different. Maybe yours is exactly the same, guys. Let me know. Shout out to Charles Duro once again, man. You know, we got to keep putting respect on these guys in the 90s, man. It was a hard choice for some of these positions because there's so many great players, right? So it's hard to choose sometimes. Like I said, I was a little biased, guys. This was not the best player at each position. I went with the guys that I wanted in my all-time starting five, guys. You guys know the deal, man. I'll catch you guys on the next one.